What is cracking, people? Hopefully we're all doing okay. Thursday, let's kind of get into it. A bit of an update with YouTube and stuff. I'm working on some more content to get posting. So the next bit of stuff I'll be doing is just a short beginner's course and also some backtesting videos. So I'm just working out how I'm going to post them and what kind of layout I want. So make sure you guys are subscribed and ready for that. But other than that, let's kind of get into today. So as you can see, on GU, we've pushed up to kind of the area I was targeting. EU, we've pushed up to the area I was targeting, and now we've started to fall off. So now we're just trying to work out, is this going to hold? In terms of, is this going to be a trap to push up or push down? I believe we're just going to fall off, and that's kind of my guess behind that. If I read internally what's happened, I read this as a break of structure, given that we've had no breaks to the upside on the 4 hour. So if I kind of read this structure here, I actually view that as a break, especially because it did create a structure cycle. So I'm quite happy to actually use that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove more or less this and this, and then I'm going to remove that. In terms of the decisional that I've got for more or less this internal break here, because like I said, I do have this as an internal break. Let me remove all of this fun stuff like that, and we can remove that, and I'll explain my thinking as to why I think we're just going to keep selling. So that's removed. The area, the take of decisional, I'm actually going to use as this point here. So that's my take of the decisional, which was more or less yesterday. I only really use 4 hour and 15 minute. I don't really like to use any other time frame. And then we've kind of come into more or less that extreme, which I imagine is a smaller point, which I'll actually refine on a lower time frame now. So if we refine that on a lower time frame, let's jump down to possibly the hourly. As you can see, have filled that last point and have actually induced into the mitigation of that point. So if we look on the 4 hour, I have no breaks to the upside. We kind of just have this like bigger 2-leg kind of forming and doing its thing. So I just don't think buys make a lot of sense. Now it can buy, it can use this as an inducement and push up, but given that we've created equal lows and with what GU's done, I think sells are just the way to go. And I wanted sells coming into the week, and now it's kind of come up to where I wanted. So my 15-minute range, like I said, this was the 4 hour decisional. So I'm actually going to label that as 4 hour decisional. So you guys can kind of see that. Ended up holding no value, and we've more or less just come into the top range of that point. Now reading internally what we've got, as you can see, we've obviously pushed our way down. That's my break, and then that's my current range. Because we've completed the structure cycle, I'm not expecting any of this to hold. Yes, my 15-minute is bullish, but my 15-minute is actually internally bearish. So we had that as more or less our first, range created. And reason I'm going to use that is simply because of the structure cycle it created. So it actually created 1 point, and then it created a second point here, and then moved off of that point. So because that's the case, it then didn't create another structure cycle. That's where my break of structure is going to be. So I've got break here, which has then mitigated that extreme quite nicely. So we're completing the structure cycle perfectly and then pushing away. So I want to keep selling. Now, because this is just an internal break, like I said, from the 15-minute, because it is on the 4 hour, it does hold all of that weight. I'm not expecting us to actually push back up. And I'm expecting all of this to kind of be a trap. Reason I'm just going to do that is because if we look on that 4 hour, like we are bearish, and I don't want to just expect this is going to hold because I think it's going to. There's a lot of liquidity that's built up here, but I think a lot of people are buying given what the current structure is doing. This more or less is actually filled all up internally in here. This could have been a smart money trap, but I think with how it's reacted and how we've moved away, I'm more or less quite happy to actually use that as the range, okay? We had this pull down into the mitigation of extreme and then push away. So that was just my current range. This point now means nothing. So how I'm going to treat this is I'm going to actually treat this like that, which means I'm expecting the next area on my 15-minute to actually be a smart money trap. Now, because this is my break of structure and my current break of structure, because that was my last bigger range kind of here. We had the break, we had 1 point, which forced and broke to that low, and then we forced up and kind of broke that. That is my external 15-minute, but because we're working internally this way, I'm not expecting it to hold. Now, the points that I'm kind of worried about, this is my draw on liquidity of the day. So I want to sell down to this point. As you can see, we don't actually have a lot to work with. There's not a lot to work with at all. So what I'm kind of waiting for is just a bit of a push up. I'm not expecting this to hold. Like I said, we did actually take a structure cycle that was built internally in here, which we've now taken with this low. So I'm expecting a reaction up. I'm not expecting it to hold. All I'm looking for is to come into this range and then kind of decide what the go is there. Given that we completed the structure cycle here by coming to that extreme area, especially with the slow retracement, taking the trend line, taking that break, this is my current range. We can either come up and take that high, or we'll have 15-minute structure that builds its way up to this. We will then have something like that creates that, and then we can sell like that. So nothing we can do in the immediate kind of present tense of price, but that's more or less what I'm kind of looking for, is bigger 15-minute range. My hourly is bearish. I still have my hourly is bearish. That's my break of structure here. 4 hourly is bearish. So I just want to follow along with that. More or less, the hourly decisional was kind of this take here. And yeah, that's kind of my read. Now, we did look for a sell Tuesday. There was no entry, but that's kind of the read. Now, GU is actually kind of the exact same. We did look for a trade yesterday, so we actually had a break of structure here yesterday, and we did look for a trade. It just didn't give an entry. It just kept pushing. Now, the reaction and the price that it created on the way up was all trash, was all shit price action, which is why I was still expecting a sell-off. Now we've come and we've kind of taken that last point. So break of structure, where's my decisional? We'll jump on the 4 hour. Where's my decisional? You know, that's a decent pullback. The 4 hour decisional technically is actually this pullback and kind of push down. We don't really have a good 4 hour decisional, if I'm being completely honest. I would more or less use that as my 4 hour decisional, kind of induced that, pushed up. On the hourly, we've obviously got that break. In terms of the hourly decisional, it's more or less the same thing, funnily enough. Like I said, I was just targeting this liquidity because of it being a demand to supply point. But that's also the last imbalance. There's no other imbalance. So this is kind of the extreme, if I'm being completely honest. Whoops. That's kind of the extreme of that range. There's no more in there on the 4 hour. So we've reacted off that. Fun enough, exactly what we wanted coming into the week. Down to the 15-minute. And now we can kind of read it the other way. So remove all this crap. That's the bigger decisional. We don't need to worry about that. Really good read of price action in there. That's my extreme of my current 15-minute range, which is also my decisional. So what you've got to understand is they're both the same, which means this point does hold a bit of weight and should give a bit of reaction, but it makes no sense to hold given current structure. In terms of break of structure, the last structure cycle we created was that. So that's my break here, which we broke and retested and pushed down. We then pulled up into the area of extreme, which is really, really good for creating that new structure. Off of that structure, we've now pushed down away from that. I would say none of this necessarily holds any weight. Higher time frame overrules. 15-minute is kind of bearish now. I'm more inclined to use this as my extreme, funnily enough, as much as that is my bigger range. This is just a lot cleaner, like so. And then off of that, we've just got break. So we've got a huge imbalance with a point. What I'd be expecting is price to kind of come down to this area. Like I said, because that is my break, this entire point is my decisional, and then my extreme actually sits down here. So this is a decisional, and we have medium induced into it, providing this medium inducement. So it is okay for me to actually buy off of this point. Okay, it is valid too. What I'd kind of be expecting is we do exactly what I was expecting on EU, and we get something like this down to this extreme, because we have got that extreme that hasn't been quite filled yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to mark out that and that. So decisional, extreme, this entire area is a decisional. If we jump on the hourly, we've got that bigger hourly point under the Asia lows. So realistically, like, we can take a trade from anywhere from here. I didn't take liquidity. It's more or less just a supply to demand, so it's more or less a medium inducement into that point. So trading for a buy is the only thing I kind of see today on GU. It'll need to be pretty good confirmations. We've got an hour till London Open, so hopefully within the hour we can kind of build some structure. And the next invalidation I'm more or less heading to is this area that sits up here, which is my next invalidation area. But I do want to sell everything. AU, we can jump on a higher time frame. We're doing exactly what I wanted. We've come in and we've taken the retest. There's no other points that fit in here. We've got the extreme and then the decisional. We have induced into the mitigation of that decisional. The decisional itself is actually, funnily enough, mitigation. Didn't really take liquidity. Didn't really take anything, did it? Oh, it kind of did in here. So what you would kind of have is new structure cycle formed here. So we don't need to worry about this. So structure cycle formed here. Decisional is actually this entire range, like so. And then reading internally in that, we've now medium induced into that decisional really fucking cleanly. We can actually remove that, playing out perfect. We'll go down on a lower time frame and see what the go is here. So really good structure cycle internally there. Down to the 15-minute, what have we got? We've got our break of structure because I had that as my bullish range. And this just comes down to following structure. The reason I had that is we've just mitigated and pushed away, and we've just continued to push away. I'm actually going to remove that. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to remove that. That can go, that can go, that can go. That's fine like that. And we can remove that as well. Beautiful. So what we've got in here is the reason I had that as my last point because we had mitigation of this point, push away, which created really small points in here. We then pushed away and created a structure cycle that had mitigated away from this. So structure cycle created, push away. This was my last range, break, break, push up, break, which then created a retest and created a structure cycle in here with the mitigation of this point and push away. So this was my last structure cycle, which then pushed away, created another structure cycle in terms of this point here with point mitigation, really clean structure cycle, push away again, break, break. So what I'm kind of going to actually read this as is I'm going to have this as my break. And I don't even know if I'd have that as my bigger 15-minute range, to be completely honest. Given we've kind of moved away from it, I don't really think it holds any weight. It's come into the extreme point. So this would be more or less that extreme point here. But I just think we're bearish. Hold down, break, break, internal break. I've kind of got that as my bigger external break. Just given that this did create a structure cycle to break this high. You obviously had a fair bit of pull down off of that. This one definitely did. Push out, low to high, pull in. Yeah, I don't mind it. I really don't mind using that as my external break, and I think I want to have this as my 15-minute range. In terms of points, same shit again. We've got a decisional that broke the low. We've got the extreme that broke the low. I would imagine that this would actually come up further towards the decisional and kind of sell through it. But we're able to buy through this, understanding that if this is still our range, our bullish range from this low to this high, and this is more of an internal movement, then that's also really clean. But I think I'm happy to kind of use it like that, because if we read it, all very filled on those higher time frames, very, very filled. So I'm a bit 50-50 on AU's range at the moment, because like I said, it is very filled. And I do really, really like the ranges we created internally moving away from the mitigation areas of this point. Only thing to kind of, yeah, because that entire point's kind of a decisional. Yeah, that entire point is kind of a decisional. So I'm going to use that as my range, and I'm going to be working internally only. So that is my range. I only want to sell. This to me is a smart money trap. And that's how I'm going to treat this. Whether or not that's the case, that's just how I'm going to read this price action coming into today. And that kind of lines up with EU and GU. If we do another read just to make sure I've got everything how I want it, we've obviously mitigated this area and pushed away. See, I'm almost happy to use that as my my decisional as well, which is, I think it's been mitigated. No, so EU, I still have that as my bigger range. Understanding we are coming from an extreme, it has to come and take this point. Okay, so if we're going to buy from EU, it has to come and take this point. My 15-minute range is still that larger range. It hasn't changed, and I'm happy to use it like that. So smart money trap, I'm looking for this to come up and then to sell into this area. Okay, that is my draw on liquidity. With GU, it's a little bit different. So we've mitigated the area of decisional that we pushed away from. We then created a structure cycle up off of that. So it's already been created. So I don't think this point will hold. I would say this will be a trap here. And we will be coming for the extreme low. So this will be a trap as well, I would say. I just want to sell. This low to me on GU should not hold. Given where we're coming from and what's going on, I would say it's not going to hold. That is the last imbalance in that entire 4-hour area. It's all filled. All filled. So I will be trying to sell GU. I don't think this point will hold. If it gives me a chance to buy to sell, I'm quite happy with that. But it's highly unlikely given how far we've come down already. 4-hour on here. I mean, we've broken. We then pulled down to the extreme level that had taken liquidity. So we've got really nice take of liquidity. The decisional of this range, we don't really have one, to be completely honest. It's just a whole bunch of liquidity. The decisional and the extreme are more or less the same thing. So we've mitigated here. That's then pulled down and mitigated the extreme. So this point here is a very strong point. It's a straight range to the downside. This makes sense to continue to push it to the upside. So buys on this pair, sells on all the others. And that's how we'll go into today. I wouldn't be surprised if we had a new lower low coming into next week, but hopefully we're able to get that retracement coming into today. Really use that to our advantage and sell through price action, which would be quite clean. And we'll go from there. So any questions, let me know. Might go live with the group today, depending on if there's anything. And like I said, stay tuned for some educational content that's coming. So other than that, I'll see you guys tomorrow.